Hello everyone. It has been a minute, but I am back with a podcast and I'm going to commit to weekly recordings again. So that will be really nice because I have missed it and I know a lot of you have missed it because you tell me all the time. And I just wanted to thank you for being such loyal listeners to it. The reason I'd originally planned on just taking June and July off, but then my June, July, August, September, and October were the busiest of my entire career, at the highest prices that I've ever had. And so that is what motivates me to continue to step into this role with marketing, because probably 60% of those clients were new to my brand. So despite being established and having photographed a lot of people, I am still finding ways to attract people into my business that don't know anything about it and find it organically. And I was able to have coffee with one of those people and get a little insight from her. And she just talked about how she discovered my work and what it felt like to be on the client side. And she had just moved here from out of state. So there are still a lot of clients and potential clients out there just waiting to fall in love with your brand and work with you. But a lot of photographers, especially family photographers, are struggling to get their marketing going in the right direction. So I still feel extremely passionate about this work and helping everyone. I definitely also, on the personal side, struggle with saying no, which is something that I am working on myself. And so that's why those months ended up being a little more busy than I had hoped for. It's an interesting time in parenting right now because I think I've talked about this before, how my girls are 13 and 14, almost 15. And I don't know if anyone else out there has teenagers, but they awaken in the evenings to talk. When they get home from school, they kind of disappear into the corners of the home. They're like little spiders. And then once I sit down to edit or I would be at a shoot, that's when they would be like, now's the time. So I definitely, moving into 2025, want to create more space to be home in the evenings. It's so funny because I know I've talked about this before too, where when they were little, I was like, oh, when they grow up, when they get older, I won't be so needed in the evenings, but I actually was much less needed in the evenings when they were little, because they would just go to farking sleep, which teenagers, if you have them, you know that they don't. Okay, and then I also want to address coming back later too, because I don't know if you heard my belly growl, but it did, because of the election. And it was very interesting to me because in the past, my family has always been very political, especially my mom. And so the way that we operate through politics is empathy. And I'm a big empath, and the election was really hard for me. I do not love what either party is doing or has done over the past 4 years. It's been really frustrating to be an American. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. But as a woman and as a mother of daughters, I feel like I don't have any choice but to be pretty much a one-issue voter at this point in time, which is body autonomy. So when that feels like it's under threat, not for me and my family particularly because of where we live, but for other women across the country, I just trust women so much. And pregnancy and motherhood, I just believe, should always be an enthusiastic choice. And so I struggle. I struggled through the election cycle. As always, I open myself up. And I know this doesn't have anything to do with marketing per se, but it does, because the economy is going to change and adjust depending on whose policies we're living under. So I always open myself up for discussions because I feel very, very secure. I'm a huge researcher. I'm a huge believer in listening to both sides. I have had so many conversations with people that I inherently don't agree with, and I will always meet them with kindness and openness. But this election cycle was really rough for me because I just felt like there was a lot of just vitriol, and that's always really hard. And as a mom of daughters, I get this like fight or flight feeling when I feel like rights are being trampled on. It just scares the shite out of me, to be honest. And so I have to like recalibrate myself a little bit. So that is the reason for my absence. And I think I'm not any sort of economic predictor. I have my economic people that I really trust and I listen to. And there's a lot of discussion about, what'll happen in 2025 and beyond with the economy. And that affects all of us because photography is not a necessity. It is something that people do when they have the funds. So that means that if we do end up in a situation where the economy changes or people are holding on to their available cash tighter, then we need to build even more trustworthy brands. And I was talking to my husband because he's had to deal with my little roller coaster of emotions over the past month. He's amazing. He's always so supportive, but I think he's kind of sick of me spouting off all of these things. And finally, I was like, so I think of myself as a very powerful person, not like, I am a powerful person. Like I'm a powerful person over my own life. That's how I feel. And I'm really, really proud of the business that I've built. And I still am in this phase with where I'm with my age and my life where I want to see what is possible for myself. Like I think there's so much about the world that you or I or anyone just can't control. And I don't have control over policy. I don't have control over big governmental decisions. I don't have controls about how people use their wealth or influence, but I do have control over myself. And so where I've come over the past couple of weeks is just circling back to that self-reliance. And so I sat down with my husband and I said, let's set like a hugely audacious goal for the next 4 years, like financial goal. Why not? Let's just see what's possible. We're kind of at this is the other thing about parenting teenagers is that when you have little kids, you're like, these are the most expensive little kids. They need all these snacks. They need all this stuff. They need 6 strollers. They need this bumbo seat. They need all of these. They're constantly growing out of their clothes. But teenagers are way more big ticket expensive. So as I look forward, I'm like, okay, we're going to be buying cars for them to drive. We're going to be paying for sports. There's all these huge ticket items. And so, yeah, my husband and I decided that would be really fun. What's happened with him, I think I talked about this. Maybe not. I think he started this business after my last episode, but he wanted to start a handyman business. And so because I am someone who's very passionate in helping people launch things and get things going, we launched a little handyman business for him to do on the side. And that has kind of exploded and it's been really fun for him. So having him be in that entrepreneurial mindset, he's still a firefighter, but when you're a firefighter, you do not have an entrepreneurial mindset. So having him kind of joined forces with me in that has been so fun. So that's how all of these conversations came to be. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this. So what I decided, because I was trying to decide, okay, how do I want to mentor people with marketing going into 2025? What I did in 2024 was small group mentoring, and I really, really loved doing that. But the issue was that even within each individual group, there was people at every different level. And there was people who really understood certain subsets of marketing and people who were just at the beginning. And having those people on a call was great, but I didn't get to focus for the call port where we were like doing a Zoom. I didn't feel like I got to focus as individually as I wanted to on their specific issues. And so in 2025, I'm going to be from January through May, I'm going to be doing individual 8-week mentorship. And I don't know if you can hear Rooney barking. She's barking because every freaking time I do a podcast, she looks out the window to try to find something to bark at. It's like ridiculous. But anyway, hopefully she stops. So what I really want to do is have more individual transformation, because in the beginning of those group programs, I was able to sit down with someone one-on-one, and in that initial call, I always had a one-on-one call, and we can line out their goals, and I would work with them over that time. But I didn't feel like the group aspect added much to each individual person's transformation, if that makes sense. So I've staggered them to start every 2 weeks so I don't get too overwhelmed. And I'm going to have very limited availability for each start date. So I think there's 8 start dates between the first one is January 13th all the way through May. So if you're interested in that, I will be posting more about it. I am going to include it in my Black Friday sale, and that'll be the only time that it is on sale. It's just going to be it's either going to be a small percentage off, or I'm going to include a class on Pinterest. Either way, Pinterest still, holy manoli, brings me so many leads. So still a big Pinterest fangirl. Other things that have brought me leads. Oh, if you're on Threads, which is like the Twitter of Instagram, so many freaking social media profiles that you have to have now. But I did a thread on what's working for photographers right now, and it has like 62 replies. So if you feel like you just want to get some ideas and look through it, it's a good read. It's pinned at the top of my Threads account. But those are the types of things that I'm really focused on in 2025. In addition to working with people one-on-one virtually, like through Zoom, I'd love to do a few one-day intensive in the studio where you just come in, we work all day to crank out a marketing plan for 2025. We have tea, we have coffee, we have cookies, and we do headshots. So that's kind of what I've been dreaming up over the past couple weeks, because it's hard for me to decide. And you may feel this way about marketing too, where I get almost frozen by the indecision. So I think like, oh, if I make a decision here, what if I had decided to do it differently and that way could be better? And I think I have said this before too on the podcast, is that once you choose a path, you never actually know what's down the other way. So I kept saying to my husband, I was like, I just want someone to punch me in the face, and then the answer of how to help people came to me. And he's like, well, no one's going to do that. So eventually you're just going to have to decide. So I was like, oh yeah, that is how life works. You just make a decision, and then the next thing you do is take a step forward towards that decision, and the other decisions just fade away into the black. So if you feel that feeling about what's next for 2025 for your business, just remember that you're never going to know what 2025 would look like if you decided to offer seniors instead of newborns, or if you decided to get a studio or you didn't. You eventually just have to make a decision and walk towards that decision. So now is a really good time for that resentment check-in that I always talk about. What happens to a lot of family photographers is that they feel so drowned by their work at this time of year that they just take time off to recover from it. And then instead of observing what they just went through and whether or not it served them and whether or not it made them the income that they needed or whether or not they felt aligned artistry, they get to February, March, and they fly slamming into the wall of FOMO. So they start to see other photographers working again. And instead of examining what this experience of fall was like, they're just looking for the next thing. And so now is the time, even if you just take out a piece of paper and a pen or your notes app on your phone or whatever, and write about how you felt. How did the families that you work with, how did that feel? How did it feel to send out your invoices? How did your time away from your family feel? How did it feel to deliver your galleries? Were you on time? Were you feeling like you were ahead of schedule? Did you have not enough clients or enough? Those questions can only honestly be answered now, because you will forget if you wait until January, February, March to remember, because by then you may be feeling the financial pinch of not having enough sessions, and then you get into FOMO, and then you're chasing work again, and then the cycle starts again. And the time to fix fall 2025 is the beginning of 2025, not August 2025. So if you can write about how fall felt. And if you do want to, and I know this is a goal of a lot of family photographers, is to try to spread their income more evenly throughout the year. You need to know that going into the start of the year so that you can plan and market each season. If you listen to this podcast, you know that I'm a huge proponent of seasonal marketing and seasonal planning, but you can't do that if you don't know that you want to do that. And the answer of whether or not you don't want to have 80% of your income coming in fall, you need to know that now. You need to know how it felt. You need to know which boundaries were crossed, which things felt bad, which things felt good. And from those feelings is how you can design a business that is more sustainable. Because if you just write it out on paper, but you don't remember how it all felt, that's where it can be non-helpful to you in the future. Non-helpful is not the best word, but I couldn't pull another one up. Okay, so I'll talk about my fall, some things that went really well for me. And I always try to be an example of like what is possible boundary wise, right? So I know that a lot of you know on my account that I have a very strong stance of anti-grumpy dads. After 1,000 families in front of my lens and been doing this since 2011, I have had a fair share of grumpy dads until this year. So I have had fewer grumpy dads, despite, I think I photographed 186 families this year. So despite photographing a lot of families, I've had fewer grumpy dads. And that has been amazing because if you are a family photographer, you know that negative energy from dad can bring the whole thing down. It can cause so much stress because the first person that stress goes onto is generally the mom. And then it goes to the kids. And the dads have no idea the amount of control that they actually have over the outcome. So once I started talking about it was the first step. I would just playfully talk. I was scared. I was scared of the boundary at first because I didn't want to offend people, because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that you're not a good parent. I have, as a psych major, all sorts of reasons why I think dads can struggle in front of the camera. Some of them are the same reasons that we all struggle. We don't see a lot of photos of ourselves as we get older. And it can be jarring to know that you're getting in front of the camera and those things that you may carefully turn this way and that in front of the mirror to avoid seeing are going to be put in your face. And for men, that can be anywhere from weight gain to hair loss to wrinkles to just general aging. Our work is a mirror to people, and we have to remember that and be respectful of that feeling. And so if I ever have a mom or anybody who says, oh, I love the photos, but I don't like the way I look, the first way I respond to that is, yeah, I totally know how that feels. And as a woman, I feel like my empathy for dads can be a little bit less. So I try to be mindful of that. But at the same time, I have to have a boundary within my business if I feel like something is hurting my ability to produce the type of galleries that I want. So the initial step in that was literally just lightly talking about it, communicating about it in a playful way. And that got a lot of positive reinforcement because what it allowed, especially I feel like moms, and of course this dynamic changes, of course, if you have same-sex parents or anything like that, but I'm talking just mom-dad dynamic. What happened was that I feel like mom was able to say to dad, you need to act this way because this is her rule. And this is a big mirror back to society and how, we treat each gender role, and there could be a whole philosophical discussion that we won't get into here. I'm trying to just toe the line. But I think what it allowed her to say is, it's not me who's saying, even though it should be enough, it's not me saying, show up, be playful, don't be grumpy. It's the rule. It's the rule of this business. So I decided to take it a step further, and literally in my contract, there's a box you have to check. There's not many boxes you have to check, but one of them is that grumpy adults are not allowed. And that is like the physical check mark of the client that they have to do. And so that right there can open up the conversation to the other parent who may be feeling grumpy to say, hey, just FYI, this is a rule. And oh my gosh, the amount of feedback so positive that I have gotten from instituting this. And it almost, I feel like, freed some dads from this expectation that they have to hate it. And they just let go and became playful and snuggly. And that has been really amazing. Did I still get grumpy dads? Yes, it's just part of the game. Unless I started doing like a welcome video that had examples of grumpy dads, which I don't even know how I would do that without, I could make my husband pretend to be a grumpy dad. I think I'll always get them. But that is an example of a boundary that was frustrating the hell out of me for years until I decided to draw a line in the sand. So those are the types of things that if I didn't have that boundary, and this was 2022 and before, and you were to say, oh, how was your fall? 100%, I would have been like, oh, it was fine, but there was just a lot of like grumpy dads and it was just really hard. And I just don't feel that way anymore. So I think that me being a person who photographs a lot of people, I want you to know that your business can be run the exact way that you want it to be run. And there aren't any rules beyond what allows you the creative freedom to produce the results that you and your clients want. And a lot of that circles around to branding and marketing and how to build a trustworthy business. If you don't know what type of client and what type of session that you are trying to achieve as an artist, it's really hard to build a trustworthy brand around that because you don't have the language yourself. So this is the point in time in the year where you need to do it. And if you want to voice note it to me, I can listen to you. If you just need it to be somewhere, or even voice note it to yourself, or just speak the words into existence so that you can go back to them when you're in planning mode and you're starting to be like, ooh, how do I want 2025 to feel? Well, you sure as hell know you don't want it to feel like this fall because of XYZ. So luckily you can start putting boundaries and processes and systems in place to prevent those feelings from happening again. Okay, so I wanted to give an overview of some of the podcast episodes that are coming up. So this one I titled an economic check-in. Just we know, we don't, we know, and we don't know. We possibly know, but possibly don't know what 2025 is going to look like economically. But no matter what is happening in the economy, we need to have a trustworthy brand. And I say that as someone who just had their most profitable year ever in a time where a lot of other photographers were really struggling. And that's with a 60% new client base. So that's how I feel strong enough to be a educator on this, because again, going back to one of my old whiny points is these photographers who don't actually have profitable businesses try to teach marketing and literally are making all their money off education. Getting clients to work with you is a whole different subset as to getting photographers to work with you. I know that because I talk to both. A couple ones coming up are going to be magnetic marketing, getting over yourself. That's the title of one of these, because we're going to get a little more nitty gritty in this season. I don't really have seasons of the podcast, but this time. Then the next one after that is going to be getting over other people. We're going to be talking about storytelling marketing, separating yourself from your brand, adding in a new specialty, and set it and forget it. Set it, but don't forget it. So yeah, those are a couple of things that are going to be coming up that we're going to be talking about. And I'm really excited. I feel there's a lot of things on planet Earth that I don't love, like supposedly aliens that are living in the ocean. I'm already terrified of the ocean because I am 1000% convinced that if I were on a boat anywhere in the world and I fell off the boat, I would be eaten by a shark. Just immediately, just like the second my body hits the water, the sharks are like, there she is. This dumb bee finally did it and we're going to eat her. And so I don't need anything else in the ocean that could possibly eat me or I don't even know, take me to their leader. So I'm staying out of the ocean in 2025, but I do want to start this journey of seeing what's possible for this creative business. And a lot of that is going to depend on my marketing. And if you have a similar goal or you're in growth mode, a lot of that is going to depend on your marketing as well. And so I have something kind of cheesy, and if you hate it, you can just close out now. But it's a little poem that I didn't write it, don't worry. It's by Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorite authors ever. And it just really spoke to me about how I feel about myself right now. So if you hate poems, just leave. But if you want to listen to it, this is it. It's called The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little you left their voices behind. The stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So I just really love that poem. Because at the end of the day, nobody is coming to make your life what you want it to be. It has to be you. And that is both powerful and scary, but the energy that I'm tapping into now, mostly because I don't have a choice for my own sense of self-worth, is I want to continue to see what's possible, and knowing what I know about myself, that when I have added resources, that means that I'm able to add more to my community, whether through donations or time or energy. So I hope this episode was helpful, and I will check in with you guys next week.